Power creep. Now, the situation where successive updates or expansions to a game introduce more powerful units or abilities, leaving the older ones underpowered or otherwise completely useless. Yeah, I got tired of hearing it too. Power creep is probably the biggest buzzword of 2024, at least when it comes to tower defense games. I swear, dude, before this year began, no one seemed to care about this phenomenon. But I guess when the year started, someone had a conniption, and this conversation got started everywhere. What began as a word used to talk about a genuine issue has been reduced to a mere buzzword, thrown around at random, and frankly, a form of brain rot in my opinion, within a very short time. People just love to throw this word around without actually having much of an idea of what the thing that they're talking about is. Except for you. I love you, Remy. In this video, I want to revisit the subject of power creep in TDX. Specifically, I want to talk about and show that this isn't really that much of a problem. Yes, TDX has a lot of issues as a game, but power creep isn't one of them. And to prove this, I'm going to show and explain what is, in my opinion, the one and only instance of power creep within the entire game. Then, with that example in mind, I'm going to go to every other tower relationship in the game and show how all of these towers complement each other, rather than power creep over each other. Got all that? If so, be sure to like and subscribe, and let's begin. Like I said in the intro, I believe that there is only one case of power creep in the entire game, and that would be the case of Mine Layer and Golden Mine Layer. Looking at our qualifications, for something truly being a power creep, a tower needs to be better than another in nearly every single way possible, with there being no need to go back and use the previous towers. Unfortunately, this is true in the case of these two towers. Golden Mine Layer, while he may cost more to place and upgrade, has higher health, more powerful abilities, hidden detection across all paths, and two unique, powerful long-range abilities, both of which are capable of dealing thousands of damage. The normal Mine Layer cannot compete with this, as its strongest path has no stealth detection. It has worse mines, less HP, and no abilities of its own. Combined with the fact that neither tower has a placement limit, and the fact that Golden Mine Layer can be used offensively while the normal one simply cannot, makes the original totally eclipsed by its golden counterpart. This, my friends, is power creep incarnate. But like I said, this is the only example of power creep within the entire game. Don't believe me? Well, let's look at some examples that I've lined up here. Our first example here would be Ranger and Operator. And no, I am not comparing Ranger to his golden counterpart. The DPS difference, the HP difference, and the utility difference makes Golden Ranger more comparable to Ghost, John, and Laser Gunner, not Ranger. That would be like saying the TDX Golden Soldier power creeps the normal Scout. No, we're not doing that. I'll be comparing Ranger to his next of kin, Operator, instead. Ranger and Operator are both single-target DPS towers, capable of dealing high amounts of damage. One may see Operator as just the next step up from Ranger, better in every way. But that is not true at all. While yes, Top Path Ranger becomes obsolete when compared to the stats of Operator, Ranger's bottom path possesses Ignore Bullet Resistance and multiple forms of crowd control, two things that Operator does not have access to. The Ranger still has value to players after they unlock Operator. Take for example, Golden Ranger and Laser Gunner as another example. While at first glance, once again, it may seem like Golden Ranger completely outclasses the Laser Gunner, that becomes a lot less true once you really look at these towers. While yes, Golden Ranger has more HP, can bypass his resistance, and can stun enemies, he can't provide hidden detection support, nor does he have any form of crowd control. These two things are present on the Laser Gunner, who can also stun enemies as well, and has the ability to pierce and permanently reveal stealth enemies, while having access to a large, damaging shockwave ability. No one can deny that Golden Ranger is still a better, stronger tower than the Laser Gunner, but it doesn't do everything that the laser gunner does, and the laser gunner excels, especially with its pierce. In fact, if you want to ignore laser resistance, you can simply place 1-5 laser gunners, which solves this problem, as the laser gunner will do bullet damage in this state. Golden Ranger may be more powerful, but since it doesn't take all the jobs of laser gunner, and laser gunner can still be used in certain situations, it cannot be called in good faith power creep. One final example I want to focus on is Juggernaut and Golden Juggernaut. While yes, the Golden version does more damage and performs better in the Core 4 game modes, the Core 4 game modes are not the entire game. Laser resistance is a thing that exists, and exists in large quantities within Endless, the Halloween event, and the Tower Battles event, showing that these Golden Towers are not infallible. This is where the normal Juggernaut shines, being able to ignore his own resistance as well as providing high bullet damage for a low price. Its high health, but not too high health, means that Juggernaut is able to avoid being targeted by bosses as much as G-Jug is. And the fact that its bottom path has more DPS than Golden Juggernaut's top path makes it a better counter to laser-resistant enemies than the top path is. The damage type system really saves its tower, huh? Additionally, Golden Juggernaut's more expensive prices lock his more expensive DPS behind walls of cost inefficiency, meaning that in a real match, a normal Juggernaut will be able to dish out more DPS for cheaper. Now at this point, you may bring up XWM in Juggernaut, and to that, I want to go into how TDX balances its late game towers, actually how it balances all of its towers, and talk about how good they actually are at doing so, despite what people like to think or say. You'll notice that every single tower in the game has a defined strength and weakness, and there's no better example than the Sentry. The Sentry does super high damage, has very low costs, and a very, very small placement footprint. It's able to rebuild itself when it dies as well, making it a great bait. However, this is balanced out by the fact that it cannot receive any friendly buffs, and has a very limited field of view. Sentry is probably the best example, but you can see this with all the late game towers. Yes, XWM can build itself 3 times, deal thousands of DPS, it has hidden flying and stun immunity, and it can see over obstacles, and it has a lot of HP, and it has a lot of range. But it is extremely cost inefficient. Its levels are very unaffordable. Its bottom path has a huge dead zone. It takes an extremely long time to rebuild. It takes up a lot of space, and it cannot be supported by buff towers. This is why Juggernaut is still desirable over XWM in many situations. XWM is only meant to be used in modes where money is plentiful, which it is not in the Core 4 game modes. Golden Juggernaut is also very expensive, and does laser damage, which is a double-edged sword, and, because of its extremely high HP, is often the primary target of boss attacks. Warship is an unstoppable powerhouse, but it is extremely expensive, and you can't bring it everywhere. It lacks stealth detection on the top path, and it has a huge placement footprint. Not to mention, bosses will often specifically target this tower. Helicopter can avoid most attacks, sure, but once again, it is very expensive. Not easy to get stealth detection, requires a lot of player attention on the early levels, and all the bottom path. It's pretty fragile. If it dies, it can kill your other towers. It has an entire branch of enemies that are specifically designed to target and kill it. And if it gets corrupted by the Nightmare Void, good luck dealing with that, dude. That thing can absolutely wipe you. Even extending to the mid-game towers, they have their flaws too. There is no tower that does it all, aside from maybe Barracks, but Barracks is a unit tower, and anyone can get that tower extremely early into the game. Like, I could go on and on and on, but I really hope you see what I'm trying to say now. Even if you are a TDX power creep believer, even if you don't believe me at all, well then let me just tell you that all these endgame towers I mentioned, you don't need them. The early game and intermediate towers are just as useful and applicable as the endgame ones. Every tower in TDX is good at something, even if they could be better, like Cryo Ranger and Sniper. Even if the towers are boring and deserve some sort of glow up, like Grenadier and Juggernaut, they are all good at something. For crying out loud, dude, Ranger, a starter tower, can solo intermediate and elite mode if it's supported by an EDJ. What other Roblox TD game can you say that the starter tower can complete 3 of the 5 core game modes? Almost every tower does something different. It has its own unique role, its own unique gimmick or feature that allows it to still have some sort of use over some other tower in some sort of scenario. TDX is a game designed to have you use multiple different units as a team. Yes, Missile Trooper, or Juggernaut, or Railgunner, they're not going to be able to solo a mode on their own, Neither can the golden towers. That's not healthy game design. It's not supposed to be that way. These towers are meant to cover each other's weaknesses and be used in tandem with one another. It's their teamwork. It's an army. And since no tower entirely eclipses another, except for the golden mine layer thing that we talked about, this means that there is no power creep in TDX, except for the golden mine layer thing. It's a myth. Stop believing in fairy tales. Like I said in the beginning, TDX has a lot of problems. Oh boy, is this game not perfect. But power creep, it's just not one of them. Instead, I believe there is a different problem that is at play here, and I talked about it a tiny bit earlier. It's one that I feel like John will just naturally rectify later on in the game's life. And if not, we can just bully him into doing so. The real issue that TDX faces is that since newer towers have more bells and whistles attached to them, making them appear cooler, and also the fact that towers have been getting really expensive lately, it feels like the starter roster is being left in the dust, made boring and not fun to use. Top Path Grenadier, like I mentioned earlier, it sure is strong, but it is so boring when compared to Missile Trooper's 3x damage rockets, or the MRL Trooper on Barracks' 4-shot explosive. Some towers do kind of slip through the cracks when it comes to being just stat sticks, which aren't fun and give people the illusion that new stuff is better just because it's cooler. Juggernaut isn't useless, I already talked about this, but he's not nearly as cool as his golden counterpart, who has a unique and powerful ability as well as a more sleek and appealing design. So what's the solution? Well, I think it's something John did not too long ago, reworking towers. He did it for Shotgunner, Laser Gunner, and Sniper, giving them new abilities, new passives, and higher damage, and it worked out really well. Looking across the pond to TDS, we can see that tower reworks with new abilities and mechanics work really well, as these updates are always hype and always high quality. So one thing I hope to see more of in the future is more tower reworks, to make them more interesting, like they are doing right now for the Relic. Some ideas that I've come up with, I'm not really going to spend too much time on it, is let Operator's Ghost be able to stealth himself because it's called Ghost, but maybe make it a little bit worse. Maybe giving Grenadier, like, cluster bombs, or maybe giving Juggernaut, like, more health, or, like, being able to, like, resist damage. Like, basically giving him a lot more defense. I don't really know. I have a lot of ideas. Maybe I'll save it for another video, but I feel like the real issue that TDX faces, that being older towers, the starter towers at release being less interesting, that can be easily solved with just a few reworks here and there. But yeah, anyways, that's really all I got for this video. If you enjoyed, please be sure to like and subscribe. This will be probably my last TDX video for a little bit. I really don't want to milk that and become a full-time TDX YouTuber. I do want to make other stuff. I'm going to work on other things eventually, but yeah, that's really all I got. So if you enjoyed, once again, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye.